Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It's Thursday already. What a quick week. I'm Paul John Dykes, of course, and I'm joined by John Paul Mason. JP, you had a busy weekend last weekend. Tell us about that before we get stuck into the nitty-gritty.
All Celtic related as well. The Tommy Burns supper on Friday, obviously spoke about it last week on Thursday, and it was just really, really brilliant to be back in the room with a load of folk that I used to go to games with, and catching up with two of the guys, Martin and James, that I got a lift with to the airport the night before Seville. So we've got that story to share for the rest of our days. And I actually didn't realise how drunk James was in Seville. Like he says, he kind of came to in the second half, but the rest of the day is a blur. Well, I thought he was compos mentis, but just shows you how much I know. But I know it was great, and former players there. Scott Brown is the honorary president. Paul Riley had a good wee dig at him when he sat back down and said, just in case you're worried, Brady, the Kingfisher's still open till 3 a.m. the night, so you can go and get your kebab if you need it. Famously, the Kingfisher chippy, where he was pictured outside with a takeaway of some sort. And who else is there? Tosh McKinley, who did a stand-up routine.
Yeah.
Essentially a stand-up routine. So Tosh McKinley is now a football stand-up, which was entertaining. And Hugh McDonald did a Q&A with Peter Grant and Jackie McNamara, talking about their sort of time with Tommy Burns and time at Celtic and everything else. And just for Malcolm Ross, if you're watching, none of these people are close personal friends of mine. I just happened to attend a Celtic event where they were speaking, so no need for any name dropping or anything like that. I was just in a room with these people. I didn't speak to them or anything like that. So just in case you get the knickers and a twist over it.
That's a strange thing to get triggered by, JP. I just find that bizarre. I mean, listen, if I'm tuning in at any show and someone has got a take on Celtic because they've seen something, heard something, been in somebody's company, I want to hear it. As a Celtic supporter, I want to hear as much insight as I can possibly get. And by the way, the thought of Hugh McDonald doing a Q&A with Peter Grant and Jackie Mack, that's the kind of thing I would pay for that subscription. Hugh McDonald is one of the finest journalists we've got in Scotland. Simple as that. It has been for a long, long time. And those two guys with the passion they've got for Tommy, that would have been brilliant to see that as well. But no,
the one thing that Peter Grant said as well was he was at Celtic 22 years, and he said it might not have been the most successful time. People go on about him missing out on the stopping the 10. He was part of the centenary season League and Cup double. He was part of Love Street 86. Mm-hmm. That was his first title, I think. That's what he said. Yeah, and he said basically at the end it was like, look, he said that I might not have been associated with the greatest Celtic teams or whatever, but he says I'll always be Peter Grant at Celtic, and that's good enough for me. And I was just like,
this is the thing with these guys, JP, and we've got a few of them in the team just now who were with Celtic from a young age, very young age. I mean, when you talk about Callum McGregor, correct me in the comments, but he's been here before the age of 10. You know, it's incredible when you think about that. And Peter Grant, obviously, it was a different system with regards to youth development back then, but from a young age at Celtic. And then, of course, he comes back. And the only thing, I remember being at the Granty testimonial against Bayern Munich and going to that game. He divided opinion. That was the bizarre thing. He did divide opinion amongst the Celtic fan base. We never even went through on the bus that night. It was just me, my cousin, and a few others in a motor through to Celtic Park to play Bayern Munich. And you were looking about thinking, well, for a player like Granty, this should be full. I think it was 40-odd thousand, which, by the way, great turnout for a testimonial game. But I think sometimes you look back on players and what they've given the football club, and sometimes it's taken for granted. He was, pardon the pun, when he came back as part of Mowbray's management team, the only thing that I was disappointed in was the fact that he wasn't more front and centre. And I know he has to give Mowbray his place, but the Grant that I saw in the park was the one that wouldn't let anybody away with anything in your face, in the referee's face. He was quite calm and reserved. maybe that's just the way that it works for him in coaching, JP. But when he came back to Celtic, I thought, absolutely brilliant, a proper die-hard Celtic fan and player. I think he missed the 85 Scottish Cup final. He then missed the 1988 Scottish Cup final through injury. Was it an eye injury or a broken leg? He broke his leg that season. And then, of course, he was back for the 89 Cup final and the 95 Cup finals. So, no, I love Granty. I think he's absolutely superb. No, fair play to you as well. JP, we've spoken about Tommy Burns. I'd never tire about talking about Tommy, and that wasn't the end of your weekend either.
No, well, the just so happened, I guess, because it was international weekend, that my friend Michael had roped me into being involved with the foundation dance dinner on Saturday down at the Crown Plaza. So found myself there not so long after leaving the Tommy Burns supper on the Friday, and yeah, but that Saturday was great as well. In particular, James McInerney, who we spoke about, and he was in, obviously, Bend It Like Bratback, was in the Tommy Burns story as well, which he reminded me about when I was speaking to him. Really nice guy, and he sort of came on and as Willie Maley, so came on as Willie Maley, the player, in the old vintage kit, and sort of stood and spoke as if he was Willie Maley speaking back then. And then he came on again as Willie Maley as manager, and the kind of I don't know what kind of hat you would call it, a pork pie hat maybe,
pork pie hat, yeah,
pork pie hat, and the old sort of vintage suit, and then spoke, and it was that really. I mean, it would encourage me to go and see the play in which it's from. So. Yeah, he was really good, and yeah, it was just a good night all round. I met a guy as well. Must say hello to Brian, who I met, who said that he was a fan of the show. And when he comes home on a Thursday, the first thing he says to his wife, he says, "I just want an hour with the TV, and then you can have it to yourself after that." And he watches us, which is mental, but like, really nice. So yeah, that was that, and no football matches. Didn't watch it.
Still a Celtic weekend for you, JP. And I've got to say as well, the Wakes played both nights that you're talking about. And it brings it full circle where you see the band, because I've got some footage sent from yourself, the band actually playing The Glory and the Dream. That's where it really, goes full circle with regards to the fact that we had this wee chat with Gary John Kane just about his Celtic support in life. He mentions this song that he demoed back in '87 with JJ Gilmour, the McCluskey brothers, Pat Kane, Tricia Ferns. They were all involved in it, but it was basically put in a vault, and we were saying, well, why not release that for charity? And of course it came out, and the Wakes recorded it with Carly Connor. So to see that getting played live in these Celtic events where it should be heard is just absolutely phenomenal for me, JP. I love it, absolutely love it. So fair play to Paul Sheridan. You mentioned, here you go, you mentioned a pork pie hat. We'll get to the Livy game for anybody who's wondering. But you mentioned the pork pie hat, and it got me thinking, right, the other day we were talking about cult heroes. And somebody in one of the chat groups actually mentioned Danny McGrain. And I said, Danny McGrain is not a cult hero. He's not. He's just a hero. He's a legend. He's one of the greats. And the example I gave was like saying The Godfather's a cult movie. It's not a cult movie, and we're trying to talk about it. I said Danny McGrain's beard is cult. That's definitely a cult all of its own. But you mentioned a pork pie hat. I was thinking of different items. This came to me with regards to a book that was written by a gentleman called Andy Bolan. Andy Bolan was a drummer with Eugenius. You'll be well aware of Eugene Kelly and Captain America, the band, who supported Nirvana famously. And actually, I'm sure Andy Bolan played drums in a sound check for Nirvana with Kurt Cobain before one of the gigs. Anyway, he is now an author, and he will appear at some stage on Acsom. And he's written a book about, I think it's called 100 Objects of Scottish Football objects, things that you can associate with Scottish football, but it's not your usual. So I got to thinking, the pork pie hat, JP, remember Bertie Auld? Well, you might not remember it, but you'll have seen the pictures of him after the Leeds United European Cup semi-final.
Yeah.
He's got the top off. He's walking about the park, just being Bertie, and he's got the pork pie hat. I think he took it off a journalist or a photographer who were on the side of the park. Where are all these items? Where are Henrik Larsson's dreadlocks? Because if the barber who shaved them off didn't keep them, they were missing a trick. And there's other ones. Callum McGregor's mask as well. It probably falls into this category. This is proper Celtic curio. And it should. I mean, this is a wee bit different from your usual medals and jerseys. Paolo Di Canio's golden boots. Where are they now? Craig Bellamy's collarless jersey. He didn't like a collar, so he cut it off himself. I know where that is, by the way. I know where that jersey is. Ronnie Simpson's bonnet. He had a bonnet in the goal mouth, in the goals, actually, when Celtic played in Lisbon. And in that bonnet were Bobby Lennox's false teeth. Where are all these items, right? Billy McNeil's painted boots. He wore Puma boots in Lisbon, and they were painted 3 stripes by Neely Mockin. You've also got Arthur Boric's Pope T-shirt. There's another one.
Weird. I was just going to say, I'll give you another one. Arthur Boric's champions flag that he took from the Celtic end and ran away with.
Definitely. I'm also thinking Rio Hatate's gum shields in there, but before Rio Hatate, Jerry Cranick did it first. And the Lisbon Lions teddy that's sitting in the European Cup in between Billy McNeil and John Clark after the game when they're in their bed in the hotel. Where is all the curio, JP? Yes.
Well, I mean, speaking of curio, I just thought of something. And seeing as you mentioned Nirvana, this wasn't planned. I didn't think I was going to actually show you this, but otherwise I'd have brought it down. But 30 years ago today.
Oh, was that today?
Should be my first gig. There you go.
There you go.
28th of March 1994. Nirvana at the SECC. £12 for the ticket, and I've had it in this frame ever since. I remember my mum had a picture of some relative that I didn't know who it was, and I took the picture out and put the Nirvana ticket in. And
nabbed it. So how much is that ticket worth these days? Have you ever seen them popping up on eBay and that? Because obviously he passed away prior to that gig happening.
Well, no, the gig actually, the full tour got postponed until the end of the following month, and then he passed away on the 5th of April, which actually ended up being the day that I went to my first gig, weirdly enough. Went to see Therapy in Glasgow, but I don't know how much it's worth. People have told me at various points in time that a couple £100 or whatever. I don't know. It's not something that I would ever sell. My mate took his ticket back and got it ripped in two and got his £12 back, but he didn't get his ticket intact. So there you go. 30 years ago today.
He should have found a picture of an old relative, nicked the photograph frame and stuck it in there. And absolutely, I noticed as well when you held it up, the Sebadoh was supporting as well. Yeah. Cracking band. There you go. There's a Clarkson. We've been geeks when it comes to Celtic curio. We've spoken about music. Let's talk about Livingston. There's a lot happening though, JP, and I think that there's a strange, for me, breakdown here, because on the one hand, we're going toe-to-toe with the Beaks today. I was looking to try and find out what time, not even on the SFA's website does it tell you the time of the hearing. Brendan Rodgers is up for comments made after the defeat at Tynecastle in relation to the referee and VAR, and in particular, the word incompetent getting used when referring to John Beaton. You're obviously not allowed to tell the truth after a game of football, JP. It's in the regulations. He's up today, potentially facing a ban, and the ban could well mean that he's in the stand at Ibrox when we play Rangers. With regards to that, and by the way, there's a really interesting thread. Go and check it on the Twitter page where ex-referees have got involved, given their take on the whole situation. Very interesting indeed. That's the one thing where we've got to come together and fight the authorities, because obviously we are the oppressed in Scottish football, JP, if that's the way you think. I certainly do think that there has been many examples of that over a period of generations. And so you're up against it. Dermot Desmond's got the flamethrower out in the form of a decent enough council, and we're going to go toe-to-toe. But the flip side of that is, because obviously all coming together, JP, one common cause, let's fight the authorities and win. The club are falling out with the fans again. And there's a war of words in relation to the Green Brigade and the plan, not just the Green Brigade, the North Curve and the boys as well. The plan to do the old Celtic ends, the wall of noise and colour for the Celtic women's games that are going to be played at Celtic Park. So the joint statement came out saying, we're doing this. The club then came out and said, no, you're not. And it's no really, for me, a great time. I think the timing is all wrong. We've got a few games left in the league. We need to stick together and it's fragmenting again. So on the one hand, we're all up against it against SFA, but on the other hand, we're fighting amongst ourselves. What's your take on it?
Well, I would ask the question, why is there the need to begin this wall of noise now? Like, why could that not have been done at the start of the season? What's the motivation to make it a thing and make it happen now? Why not wait until pre-season or whatever and then make it a big thing from the start of next season? I don't understand why that's become so paramount that this should happen now. I mean, there might be a reason. I don't know. Is there a reason? Do you know?
I think the reason is it's an opportunistic way of using a game that isn't attended by your season ticket holders sitting in their normal seats. Mm-hmm. So it's a Celtic women game. So last season, they saw it as an opportunity of being able to do that and set it up. Obviously, a lot of organisation goes in behind it. They couldn't do that ordinarily at a league game, for example, watching the men's team because all the season ticket holders are sitting in their seats. So I think that's the reason. I think it's just that there are very few opportunities to do it, and they've seen the women's game as an opportunity to do it. They tested it out last year. It looked phenomenal. The atmosphere was incredible, absolutely 100%. But since then, JP, the relationship between the groups and the club has got worse, hasn't it? I mean, they've been banned since then and all that. So Celtic, and they've been named, they've been called vindictive, 2 figures on the board. I've said you're not doing it.
I mean, you kind of despair, don't you, when you just think that there is finally a bit of decorum about the place, and then something like this happens. I mean, I would hope that it doesn't impact into, banners at the next home game in reference to this. You just don't need that level of distraction. We've only got a handful of games left, and in those games the attention has to be on the current the team, the first team, and not matters out with. Just the same way as I wasn't comfortable with the sack the board chance, which previously reared their head and then went away and have been away since. So I just think it's an unwelcome distraction at a time when you need everybody pulling in the right direction. And that's not saying that it's not something that could be revisited maybe in the summer or whatever, but do it when there's no football being played and people's concentration can be on things like that rather than the. I mean, this hearing today is a distraction that we didn't need, and I'm sure everybody would rather we didn't have the manager going up in front of the SFA over comments. I'm sure everyone would rather that there was no reason to have comments made after the game, and then we might have got something out of that game rather than absolute nothing that we got. So I just think it's to have any distractions at this point that's not to do with the first team and getting a result in the park is unwelcome, I would say.
This is the thing. Yeah, it's a distraction. We've come through a season that is, it's been a strange one because we've never really been flying for a great period of time. There's been wee pockets where we've performed well. We've managed to string games together, and there's always been something just around the corner that's tripped us up. And the most recent one was Tynecastle, of course. And I've said this before, I don't think that was down simply to the performance. I think there were issues that Brendan took obviously upon himself to mention after the game. But it has resulted in now us talking about it, JP, today. We've got a game on Sunday. A few days later, we've got a massive derby coming up the following weekend. So the next 2 Sundays are huge, but we've got this in between times. And we've probably spent the last, week or so talking about it. And it is a distraction. We will discuss it. What do you think will happen? Anyone's guess. I'm going to bring in some of the comments here. If anything happens whilst we're online and we don't see it happen live, please let us know. Because someone has made a phenomenal suggestion. I'm pretty sure loads of people would tune in if it was done on a dodgy live stream. The Rogers show trial on any dodgy streams, the Urban Culture asks, by the way, I'd be tuning in if it was. Box office, especially since we've been hearing that Celtic are going in with their dossier. But Robert Adworkle says or suggests that he doesn't think Celtic will get to present that on the referees today. There will be an agenda for this meeting, with the powers that be, and they won't deviate from it. So it'll be an interesting one to hear the outcome of, and I'm pretty sure everybody's sitting with their pencils sharpened and at the ready, JP, for the result.
Surely after this length of time, I mean, how long was it? When was the Hearts game? Was it the first weekend in March?
That would have been, yeah, this weekend would be 4 weeks since the game against Hearts. Yeah.
Surely that length of time, this meeting may be happening right now, or may have already happened, because why would it be an afternoon thing? Why would it not be scheduled for first piece of business today? Like whatever else the SFA do, surely today's itinerary, it's a pretty high profile case, so you'd think that would be first order of business. I mean,
it's the only order of business. You look on the SFA website, it's the only one that they've got to hear today. So you're right. So, get it held.
I could only imagine the caliber of Brendan Rodgers' suit going in there. I mean, it'll be Valentino or...
What about his belt, though? Never mind his suit. What about his belt? Oh, come on. And the thing is, we maybe should be a wee bit more rogue. Maybe we should go up to, we used to call it Park Garden, say we go up to Hampden Park with the old video and see what we could capture. That would have been a bit of content for you. Loads of good content, comments rather, coming in. So let's have a read through some of them. I was 1 minute late, Magnet. I promise we will run for an entire hour. My fault, as always. I'm getting pulled up all the time about my timekeeping, JP. Have I ever been late for a meeting with you? Never. Absolutely not. Tobago Street Police Station, Celtic Supporters Club, Mrs. Scott Brown. I hope he does well at Ayr United, actually.
He told a story, actually, on Friday. And he was talking about how when he was being courted by both clubs, and Tommy Burns was texting him, McCoist was texting him as well, and he was kind of a little bit caught in between, but then he got taken down to London. I mean, this is probably widely reported. I'm not telling anybody anything new, but it's fresh in my memory, and the fact that he's mentioned again, he said that he was taken down to London to Dermot Desmond's house, and then he was taken out for dinner, and really given the treatment, and then he says he met Rangers in a car park. So it was like, it was not really a decision to be made there.
See the thing, right? I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't heard that particular story about Bruni, but I remember reading a brilliant book. It'll be on that shelf somewhere, and amongst all my other Celtic tat, JP, and it's called "O Hampden in the Sun," and it was written by Pete Burns, not him, and Pat Woods. Right, Pat Woods is the best researcher of Celtic history, in my opinion, and the best writer of Celtic history is Tom Campbell. Again, just in my view. And it's a great book, but he talks about how the clubs did things differently. And this was obviously talking about the 7-1 game back in the day. And at that stage, Celtic did everything on the cheap, was Pat's view on it. Whereas Rangers were that side, JP, that were, they would always everything in terms of even like the club outfits, the way that the stadium was maintained, everything that they did was pristine and costly. Whereas Celtic tended to do things on the cheap. It obviously caught up with them eventually, didn't it? But I think that at times like that, you really do have to put out the green carpet, if you like. And I think it was difficult in the past to do that when you were showing, potential players around your training complex. And that training complex was the old Barrafield, which obviously is now being regenerated, renovated, and we've got Lennoxtown as well. So that's good to hear that he was winding down. Didn't we also do that with Jimmy Bullard? Didn't he spend a weekend or so on golf courses and all that kind of stuff? And I
know he was perennially linked. Like, there was always chat to him coming. He was one of that clutch of players that, alongside sort of Craig Bellamy, Darren Huckerby.
A wee bit further back, Ray Stephen. Ray Stephen played with Dundee, ended up at Mets, and every time it was a slow news day, they would just print a story that he was signing for Celtic. Never did. Honestly, that story was ran with the same picture with a dodgy moustache dozens of times on the back pages of the Scottish press. But yeah, it never ever happened. Kevin Gallagher, Pat Nevin, Paul McGrath.
Ended up in France. Just a quick one. Rose Riley spoke on Friday at the Tom Supper, and her story is unbelievable. How she wanted to play for Celtic and wasn't allowed. She was a girl, and then ended up at Stade de Reims, and then ended up at AC Milan, and won won the league titles with AC Milan and everything else, and played in the San Siro and everything. And it's an amazing story to hear. So if you're not versed on that, then look it up even.
I think there's a documentary on YouTube, so check it out. But Rose Riley now is an ambassador for the Celtic women's team as well. So she finally got her wish in being involved with Celtic. But we mentioned Bruni. We did an interview with Bruni recently. Jerry Taylor, soon to be a daddy. Again, he did an interview with Scott Brown. So check that out on the YouTube channel. Dermot O'Connor, hail from a sunny Kildare. I have watched Acsom for over 3 years, every day going home from work. Very rarely can I tune in live. Well, I hope you enjoy it live, Dermot. And it's great that you've been supporting us for that length of time. Thank you very much. And apparently, I remind Ian Roy of a young Christopher Walken. It might be that pale pallor, Ian, that I didn't get out in the sunshine too often, or maybe it's those eyes. But I tell you what, I'll take that as a compliment, because what an actor he was or is. JP, the Dead Zone. People will know him from Pulp Fiction, of course, as well. He played that brilliant part. I wish I could do an impression. You probably can. I'm not going to try.
I'm not doing it. No. Definitely not.
When he gives Butch that watch. Oh, brilliant. I love it. My man says, hail, Music Thursday with some football and some judicial propaganda thrown in. Hey, what would you rather on a Thursday? Let's be honest. Justice for Brendan. If anything comes through, let us know, because we might miss it if it's alive. And thank you, Ian, for supporting the channel. It really is appreciated. Eddie, Marcella, tuning in from Tenerife. Lots to talk about. Bernardo and Kuhn, both will be vital in this run, and don't underestimate Bernardo. Well, I think we have in the past, and we've underestimated Kuhn in the past. Let's talk about the team then, where we are, JP, with that, because I think we're at that stage where players are starting to come back at the right time. Callum McGregor, of course, Rio Hatate, Carter Vickers is back in the side. Yang's coming back from suspension. Kilgo's coming back into form. Going into Livy, how are you looking at the team? How are you setting up?
Well, and I know there's been a lot of chat about resting players and whatnot, but I don't know if it's that at that point where we can. I don't think, it was one of the things in your title for the show yesterday. Can we afford to rest Matt O'Reilly? I mean, I don't think we can. I mean, he's obviously been away in international duty. Got half an hour against the Faroe Islands on Tuesday. Apparently did quite well, but he's not exactly been overdone in the international team. So I don't think we've got to worry about that in terms of him on Sunday. I mean, surely to goodness he's starting on Sunday. And Carter Vickers as well. I would feel more comfortable. There's the two things, obviously, you've got to think about, right, okay, Carter Vickers, does he play, risk injury, or does he not play? And then he's not got the fitness level going into the game, because by that point he will not have played, unless he played. He didn't get called up for America, did he?
No.
So he's not played any football since, well, it'll be two and a bit weeks by the time that comes round. So you don't want it to be 3. If you rest him completely on Sunday, you don't want it to be 3 weeks without a game. You may know more than me in that, but I wouldn't have thought not playing 90 minutes for 3 weeks is probably not a good thing. Even if you are a fit, guy in his mid-20s and a footballer, you still need those games to be up to speed. So the Callum McGregor thing, that's a bit different, whether or not he goes straight in or he's on the bench. I think there's probably an argument to play Carter Vickers from the start, and then if we're in a comfortable position, which hopefully we will be, we can take him off and rest him. But then at least he's got a half in him or something like that. Hatate, I think it would be madness to start him again. Somebody to come off the bench, and our bench at that point is looking quite strong. Imagine you've got a bench like Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate, Yang, Ida. Like that's suddenly completely different to what benches have looked like throughout November, December, and parts of January as well, where we've been down to the bare bones, and you look at the bench and you just go, well, the manager has looked at the bench and just went, I'm not even going to play any of these.
I know. Just hasn't made the changes at times.
Yeah,
absolutely. JP, now let me know in the Let me know in the comment section if you've come up with any other curio that I've forgotten about. I'm sure there's plenty. Did I say Bruni's Shades? Bruni's Shades has to come into that as well. Mika Lustig's beach ball hat, Mika Lustig's police hat. These are the things that I want to see.
The police hat will have been returned, otherwise you'd probably go to jail. To be fair.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I wonder where it is, though. I wonder who the copper was. If he was a Celtic fan, maybe unlikely. More comments coming through. Joe, hail from Dunoon, says Joe. Ticket bought for the May Acsom gig. Be rude not to, as it's only along the roads. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Joe. Tickets have been flying, and of course, Peter Grant, who was mentioned already by JP, will be there alongside Joe Miller. It's a Centenary Boys night. It's in Dunoon. Big Ewan Martin has been pivotal in pulling all this together, so a big shout out to him as well. I know you're in the comments section. We'll be talking a wee bit more about some of these players. The comment about Bernardo, you've mentioned Matt O'Reilly. I've just seen popping up because I'm keeping an eye on the latest Celtic news coming through just to see if there's an update on Brendan Rodgers. The Celtic Player of the Year event, which has been advertised now for a few months, the voting is open for the Player of the Year 2024, JP. And I think it's an interesting one because you mentioned Matt O'Reilly and he's been coming in for some stick in recent times. If you were to ask me right now, because they are asking you to vote, who's your Celtic Player of the Year? I'm still saying Matt O'Reilly. What do you reckon?
I mean, he's definitely in the top 2 or 3. I don't think there could be any doubt over that. There may be, come the end of the season, although there's not many games left, it does feel like there's a lot of football to be played, and I know that kind of contradicts itself, but there's a lot of big football to be played, so there's a lot of big moments that can still happen, and there's many players that could be capable in that team of turning, I say, a 7 out of 10 for the season to an 8 or a 9, and that's why it's always weird when prizes are dished out. And did Ange Postecoglou not win some sort of award last month, like some sort of managerial award, like 3 months before the end of the season? I'm pretty sure he did.
I didn't see that. I don't know if it was
like I don't know if it was a league managers, or it definitely wasn't league managers award, but there was some award they won anyway, and it's kind of like, it's February. Like, there's a hell of a lot could happen between now and then. They could end up mid to lower table if they go on a bad run. But no, I think Matt O'Reilly, without a doubt, has been great. Has been over relied on massively in the absence of Callum McGregor, and in the absence of, kind of at times, he's been doing 2 jobs in the midfield, to cover Callum McGregor and obviously to play his own position as well. And that start of him playing something like 22 games on the spin and playing the full 90 minutes, I mean, that mentally and physically, that's going to take its toll, I would have thought, if you're having to repeatedly do that in front of 60,000 or in front of however. And I know people say, well, we're getting paid the money to do it, but I mean, I could imagine it is quite mentally draining to do that. So there is him, and like I said, Kyogo could turn his 7 out of 10 into an 8 or a 9 between now and the end of the season. And Kyogo's already scored decisive goals in 2 massive games for us this season. And as I said last week, a betting man wouldn't bet against him doing it for a 3rd or even a 4th time. So I'm not quite willing to be handing out awards just yet, but I think Matt O'Reilly, in terms of the fact that there was a club in Atletico Madrid sniffing around, and whilst they might have not offered the money that Celtic wanted, the mere fact that they were in the mix for one of our players, I mean, with all due respect, there's not many other players in that Celtic team that are getting linked with Atletico Madrid, and there's a reason for that. So, but Bernardo and Kuhn, Bernardo is a strange one in that we saw him play to a level that we thought, right, okay, that there's a conversation to be had here about whether or not we shell out money for him. I said at the time, the decision on that should be made at the end of the season to see where we're sitting and how he's contributed. I don't know if he's completely fallen off a cliff, but he's certainly not been at that level that he was at in late December, early January. And I guess sometimes that can happen. You look at Nicholas Kuhn's first few games, people were like, don't see it. He's not got the heart, he's not got the desire to track back. And then I heard Melly say on 20-minute Tims that he had his wisdom teeth taken out and it took him weeks to recover. So it's not just he was, hitting the eye in a squash incident or, something cockamamie like that. But
what happened to that squash ball? There's another bit of Scottish football carry-on.
But no, so the Kuhn thing as well, obviously spoke about him in terms of coming in for Yang after the suspension, and he's got one more game now before potentially starting in the biggest fixture that he'll ever play in. I don't think he's played at the level for his previous clubs, i.e. started in an Ajax Feyenoord game or anything like that. So, and I don't really know what the biggest derby is in in terms of Rapid Vienna. So he's playing himself into a start. I don't think there can be any argument that Nicholas Kuhn will start on Sunday, and then you would like to think that he continues that form. I can't suddenly see him playing terribly against Livingston. I mean, obviously there's it could happen. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I can't see it happening. So therefore, that's him in the mix with Maeda on the left, and that's two of your team picked already.
Well, I think it would be harsh if Kuhn wasn't to start against Livingston, because there's going to be maybe some deliberation around looking at Carter Vickers with regards to the fitness on the pitch, and there's a few comments coming in about that. But largely, the team that starts your thinking is going to be the majority of the team who's going to start at Ibrox. You might then manage Hatate in with 30 minutes against Livingston with a view to maybe starting them at Ibrox. I get that, but I think Kuhn would feel really hard done by. But the only thing, JP, that's making me wonder is some of the comments that Brendan's been making. He's talking about Yang in glowing terms. He's talking about Jamesy Forrest in glowing terms, best winger at the club. Obviously caveated that by saying obviously his age will prevent him from starting many games. Jan talking about how he's improved in training, how he's looking so sharp in training, he's looking the best that he's looked. Not saying much about Kuhn. Again, could be mind games, could well be mind games on the part of Brendan Rodgers. Some great comments coming through. Things to do in Dunfermline when you're deed. Stevie Boy keeping the Christopher Walken point running. We've also got my tickets for DC United, Walter Orr. We'll have a wee chat about that trip to America, actually. I thought you liked the sunshine. I'm not going to say it in a Liam Gallagher voice. I do. I love the sunshine, green-lit tail. I was born in Scotland by default. I would much rather be in sunnier climes. And apparently, it says Will McMillan, Christopher Walken's mum was from Glasgow. I'd need to check that, JP. I do not know if that's true. Rasputin comes in to say Desmond should have turned up at Hampden to support Brendan Rodgers. I agree with that. I think he should, with a flamethrower, and put real pressure on the SFA. Celtic's KC should give a press conference after the hearing, giving chapter and verse of what happened. Who knows how it's going to happen after that? And we've got a few more items of Celtic curio. Here we go. Neil Lennon, Kayal's sweatbands. What about Neil Lennon's snooze? We could get a bit of that as well. The Griffiths battery. There was also the Griffiths half bottle of Buckfast as well against Linfield, I think. Mm-hmm. Ross Evans, Henrik's headband. You're right, he did.
Ramlosa was a Swedish mineral water. Was the Henrik Larsson headband? It was sponsored by Ramlosa. Yeah, obviously the absolute geek in me found that out a few years after he left.
We've all got a bit of the geekery in us, JP. I think we should maybe try and get Jackson Oven to wear an Acsom headband. He's quite a cool dude, but I'm not sure what the St. Pauli and Celtic relationship's like these days, unfortunately. We've also got Kieran, where are all the balls Christie sent out into the stands, where there was a few, wasn't there, that season as well. Now, this is what Jonathan was saying. Jonathan Brown, do we risk Carter Vickers on the plastic pitch with his injury hit season? I wouldn't. Would you, JP?
I mean, again, I think I said last week it would be a conversation with the player to find out if he thinks he'll be all right with it. Like, if the player himself, who knows his body better than anybody, says, I don't know if I should play in this because there will be a chance that my body might not recover or I could pick up an injury, then you don't play him. But if the player himself puts his hand up and says, yeah, I'm comfortable playing. He's played in it before. It's not as if it's a new thing. I would be more inclined to go with the player. Obviously, a combination of the player and the medical staff. But if I'm being honest, I think he will start on Sunday. I just don't think we're in that position where we can. It's still a massive game, and Carter Vickers playing, as everyone said, Carter Vickers playing in that team is potentially the difference between us getting over the line and not. So I don't know if we can be as lackadaisical as to be like, oh yeah, it's fine, we'll just rest him. Because Livingston are a threat. They proved it in the cup at Celtic Park. It is, because it's a game where we're all thinking, oh yeah, the Livingston hoodoo's gone. We've won there now a couple of times. We won there with 10 men earlier on in the season. It's certainly not something that I'm taking for granted because of the size of that team and how weak we've been defensively. There's always a goal in them, and you just hope that we get the first goal and make it comfortable. But I mean, they got us back to 2 each with mere minutes left at Celtic Park, and obviously I know that they had to have a go. It was a cup game, it was a different dynamic, but we've struggled there in the past, and we've got no divine right to win everywhere we go. And just the same way as a Hibs team going to Ibrox on Saturday that will have a bit of revenge on their minds after the Scottish Cup game recently, where they were, I think, certainly wrongly done out of one decision. The other one could probably be argued, but I think one of them was abhorrent, and they said that at the time. But so yeah, and Rangers drop points against Motherwell at home, so they've not got a divine right to beat everybody that comes in front of them as well.
They got off the hook. They got off the hook with that result. They haven't even got a half time because of what happened the following day.
Definitely. I mean, they lucked out in that sense. But I mean, Hibs are a weird team. They could offer something and they could offer nothing. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But with regards to us and us looking after ourselves, I would be more inclined to play the strongest team that we can on Sunday.
I just think the defence, JP, it's not even just.
I say that in respect to the Cal McGregor, Rio Hatate situation. Yeah. I'm not saying fling them in from the start on Sunday, because obviously that would be our strongest team. But you've got to take into account the fact that they haven't played any type of football for weeks. Well, in Hatate's case, a bounce game against St Mirren. Yeah. McGregor's case, 3-4 weeks ago was his last game.
First half against Dundee. That was his. I think the last thing he did was score the 6th goal, taking off at half time. Yeah, but you're right. Hatate's not played this year, has he?
Since the Asia Cup in January.
Yeah. No, you're right. And the thing with Carter Vickers, you take him out that defence, and we are an ordinary. In fact, we're not even ordinary. I think we're a weak defence. So that is my biggest fear there. And it is a potential banana skin. We've still got more Celtic Euro coming in. Never mind Henrik Larsson's headband. Who remembers Matt McNally's headband? I do. He wore it in the Cup final, 1995. That game where Peter Grant was the man of the match. He was suffering an injury leading into that game, where the medics told him no chance would he be playing in the game in a few days' time. It would take months for him to recover. He spoke about this when we met him in Gracie's last year. It's an injury that he played with on the day. I don't know if he got the old jabs as the players used to do back in those times, JP, but it's an injury that bothers him to this day. Because I actually asked him about playing in the St Roch's charity game, and he says he cannot play because of this injury that he played through in the Scottish Cup final 1995. Some mad random person. It's true, Christopher Walken's mum was Rosalie Russell from Glasgow. See the things you learn on Acsom, JP, incredible. Brian McGinty, every debate we have about Celtic every week is who will start. No settled squad. It's a good point, Brian. That's been a major problem this season. We could probably talk about it before every game. And then we get a settled team, and you think you've got your best 11, and then we get an injury as well. Plunge McNugget, if CCV is getting managed on grass, how can you risk him on that concrete carpet? And by the way, yesterday we spoke about the likelihood or the possibility of Wraith Rovers coming into the top league, JP, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head if they had a synthetic surface, and they do apparently have So another plastic pitch to contend with, potentially. C-Sense, Liam Scales, we talk about player of the year here. That will divide opinion. I can guarantee you that will divide opinion, but it's a good shout. And we've also got Brown Warrior. Have they asked every supporter in that area if they want to be moved? We're talking, of course, about the Green Brigade with a joint initiative with the boys group and also the North Curve, talking about the green and white wall. I think what has happened is they put it out there to see what the response would be. And on social media, those sitting in the seats, just yesterday somebody said they would. I've seen plenty of people saying they wouldn't. It's my seat. I'm sitting there. I'm not moving for anybody. So, yeah, that's a massive consideration. And it's one that I think would cause issues down the line. DeMarco, says Pete McGee, is today's Joe Beltrami. So DeMarco is, of course, the KC who is representing Brendan Rodgers at today's SFA hearing. Big Red asks, is the Dunoon gig in Sinbad's, which was, of course, name-checked in the Jerry Cinnamon song. And it could have been actually a stroke of genius by Jerry Cinnamon. I didn't know that Sinbad's was a real place when I heard that lyric for the first time, JP. I've never been to Dunoon in my life. But it's happened in the past with songs, isn't it? Supersonic, Mr. Sifter, no, Shaker Maker, Mr. Sifter Record Shop, which is now visited by Oasis fans, I think, 365 days a year because it was name-checked in a song. And, of course, King Tut's name-checked last week in Michael Head. We mentioned it last week. It was on your mug. If Jerry Cinnamon had mentioned a fictitious bar, Big Red, which was going to be opened by his brother, cousin, mate, or whatever, it would have been a stroke of marketing genius. Sinbad's in Dunoon, I think I will go and visit that. We've also got Lackwinder Pal. I keep mentioning your name and pronouncing it wrong, sorry. Matt O'Reilly, still been the best. And you've got Joe Hart thrown in there as well. Joe Hart says Big Red is the player of the year. So loads to consider in there. Oh, here we go. Here's a bit of curio that I think tops every one of them, JP. The pound coin that bought Rangers. There you go. Don't know where that is. The Pork Chop Express. Where's Laura been lately? No seen her posting videos for a wee while. Laura will be interviewing Paddy McCourt tomorrow. You know that Paddy's been doing the rounds on the old podcasts, promoting the gigs that we're doing next week. Going down really well, actually. Been watching them all. And he's going to be doing a show with Laura as well. So tune into that when it happens. Paul McFarlane, we've got the comedy coming in here. Livingston sponsorship with Tony McElroy was well past that. It's sell by date. Thank you, Paul, for that. That is, of course, JP, coming to an end. The naming rights of Livingston's arena, Livingston Stadium, will it go back to the simple old Almondvale? Will it get a new sponsor? What would you feel about Celtic selling the sponsorship rights of the stadium, JP? Would that bother you?
Depends who to. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about it, depending on who it was to. It's just, it is ultimately just a name, really. I mean, everybody calls Celtic Park different things. I actually learned the origin of the Paradise name on Saturday night, which was it was a Willie Maley quote, wasn't it? Or was it a Jimmy McGrory quote? It was one of the two.
I'm not sure who coined it, but the first time I heard that was on that centenary video, JP. That brilliant centenary video when they were talking about it. But I'm not sure who said it.
It was something to do with turning away from Janefield Cemetery. Is that right? And then when they would turn towards Paradise, like
From the graveyard to paradise.
The graveyard to paradise, yeah. So I mean, like I said, it would depend on who it was and what sort of figure you were talking. I mean, there'll be people, maybe quite rightly, that would be up in arms about it and whatnot. To me, it doesn't quite go as far as some sort of Qatar billionaire coming in and just taking over the club, and suddenly we've got a bottomless pit of money. That wouldn't sit right with me. But if it was some sort of like the Adidas state, I mean, Adidas are taking so much money out of us as a support anyway with all this. I mean, we never spoke about the strip thing last week, but I mean, when they announced the teaser the day before and they said celebrating our Irish origins, and I sort of retweeted it and went, yeah, is the money going to go to charity then? And then I know. Clearly not. Like, it's just releasing anything at this time of the season just seems a bit I don't know, a bit odd, a bit off, and the whole Celtic Ireland thing just seems to be. It just seemed to me to be a bit of a cash grab. That's how I actually saw it, and kind of regardless of what that looked like, the top, the hoodie, whatever else, I wasn't something that I was going to rush out and spend money on, because I just think it's yet another strip that we're not going to wear. I don't know. That was my thoughts on it.
Well, as people that tune in on a Thursday will know, JP, we do share that, that affection for the Celtic jersey. And I think that the sponsorship question probably feeds into the jersey question as well. The theme of Irish origins is so important to this football club and the history of this football club, that we shouldn't be celebrating it through the mass marketing of a jersey or merchandise. We should be celebrating it every day as a football club, because I remember somebody yesterday, I think it was James, actually said yesterday about the John Guidetti cult hero thing. Is he a cult hero, or is he just an underachiever? It was a good it was a good suggestion actually from a fairly modern player. But I remember that game against Inter Milan, the 3-each game at Celtic Park. Great game, brilliant tifo that night as well. But I was in a hotel meeting the guy I went to the game with, and in that hotel was loads of Irish fans, and just getting to know them and speaking to them, JP, and the commitment that it takes for every single Irish fan to come over and watch Celtic is unbelievable. You wake up and you go into social media and they've already posted hours before, whilst you've been lying in your kip, that they're in the bus, they're on their way to the gate, and it's just like, wow, the commitment is unbelievable for these Irish fans. And I think that if we showed the same commitment back, and I've said this before, we would be going to Ireland more often and playing games. And it's not about going to play a game to make money, JP. It doesn't have to be a big sponsorship thing. I know the Wolves game was a last minute thing, because obviously one of the fixtures was cancelled, wasn't it, in the Korean leg of that trip, and we ended up playing Wolves at the Aviva. But we should be taking a team to Ireland every year. Now, if, for example, the fixtures don't allow us to take the strongest team over, JP, we should still take a team. Absolutely. And the thing with that as well, I look at the Celtic squad. It can benefit us to be playing games like that. I look at that Celtic squad and I look at some of the guys that just don't play. They don't contribute to Celtic. I had a great discussion the other week there. I know I'm bouncing about a wee bit with this point I'm trying to make, about somebody who said to me about the fact that so many Scottish football clubs don't commit enough of their budget to physiotherapy and conditioning. And what they find is that all season they've got loads of guys earning a wage sitting in the stands. And I don't mean Celtic in this respect, maybe kind of smaller clubs. And the advice he always gives to them is put your money into the physiotherapy. It's an absolute no-brainer. Your guys will be injured far, far less. And in the long run, you're actually spending less money, even though it's an upfront cost for the physio. And I think it's a wee bit the same. If we were able to take these games, JP, right, all these guys sitting in the stands or not even sitting in the stands could play more games for Celtic, because we don't have a reserve team. Let's go to Ireland. What about the international break? What about the amount of players we've got kicking our heels during the international break? The bounce game, that bounce game at Lennoxtown against St Mirren,
The kind of the norm really when Celtic go to Ireland is they'll play a big game in Dublin at the Aviva or the main big stadium in Dublin. But there's surely opportunities for Celtic to go to a smaller stadium and play in Cork or there's wherever they've got
testimonial games, benefit games, all that kind of stuff, JP.
Like a stadium of like something between 10 to 20,000 or even less, and do like a tour of that, because it'd be the excitement and the buzz that would generate in that community if Celtic were coming, and it would be a sellout guaranteed, because these sort of trips where you're playing in smaller grounds, there'd be a travelling support as well that would come over from Scotland. And yeah, it would be far better, I think, than like one game in Dublin. And I know sometimes obviously the dates don't stack up and everything else, and that's maybe it is pie in the sky. But in terms of like going to Ireland and keep it, there used to always be Irish friendlies when I was younger, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. I remember Liam Brady in the pre-season was in Ireland as soon as he took over as well, but it's been happening for years.
There
And the
was
thing
an
with that,
tour that DeCanio went on before the 97-98 season, because I remember
right. Mm-hmm.
the strips we played in had a different sponsor. You'll know that. You'll know the exact sponsor. I don't know what it is, but you know what I mean. There was some sort of different sponsor in that trip.
You're right, and I'm going to come back to the sponsorship.
You're not sponsored by Celtic, is that?
They were between C.R. Smith and what became Umbro, right? And when the Celtic strip appeared in the Shoot magazine in the pre-season, it was the one we stopped the 10 in, right? With Brackback and Larsson's famous goals. But the original strip had C.R. Smith on it. So it appeared in the Shoot magazine with C.R. Smith. But when we did the pre-season games, we were between sponsors, which meant we had no right to put anybody on it. So instead, we put in the kind of the Celtic style writing, Celtic FC. So you had the Bumblebee kit and you had the home kit. Very, very rare jerseys, by the way. They do appear in the jersey book. Kind of one-off. I think we wore them for 2 or 3 games. The Bumblebee kit certainly was a one-off. But in relation to that, we managed to fit a fixture into the last couple of weeks. It was behind closed doors. No one really knows what happens other than Rio Attack played the game. That could have been a game over in Ireland if we planned it better. And the thing with that as well, right? Celtic can't just be a concept in people's minds. Celtic, you've got to feel it. You've got to hear it. You've got to watch them in action, JP. And I was just talking this morning to a pal of mine, but we've got kids the same age, and we're talking about how some football clubs are phenomenal at tapping into that demographic through the powers of YouTube. So all the kids that age know who Haaland is and Ronaldo and Messi, and they know about Borussia Dortmund and all these teams, but they're just a concept, JP. They appear on a screen. You can't live and breathe these football clubs, right? But they are tapping into it much better than Celtic aren't at the races when it comes into tapping at that demographic. But these guys over in Ireland going through a generational change of EPL being the box office, and then the Spanish league, and even you see Inter Miami t-shirts being donned by YouTube influencers. These kids over in Ireland who would have been Celtic fans don't know Celtic, haven't seen Celtic. A lot of them. I know a lot of them are going with their dads and their granddads and their uncles and cousins on the ferry over and all this kind of stuff. But we need to tap into a new generation of football fan who is being targeted through devices on a daily basis on YouTube and on shorts and all this by influencers who are being paid to wear Man United jerseys and Man City jerseys and all that. Celtic aren't tapping into that market. We need to take the club and the colours and the songs and everything about Celtic, and we need to take it to them. And I think we need to do it more often.
You mentioned something, I think, where it must have been on. When did you have someone from every country on? New Zealand, Australia, and Japan, which is mental. When they said all the time zones that they were at, they were all in completely different time zones. You mentioned very briefly in that about VR headsets and the possibility of that becoming a thing. That actually put the fear of God into me, because that potentially will happen at some point, won't it? Where you buy a headset and you get like this, basically the experience of being at the game, whether it's someone sitting with the equivalent headset on and you see the way that they turn or whatever. I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that will happen.
You're right, JP. It's going that way, and I think with these brands, as I say, that become concepts because the global branding is happening through devices, it's happening through YouTube. They will eventually try and sell that child or that football fan something, and it won't just be a jersey. They'll try and sell them some form of season ticket, and it'll be a virtual season ticket. And the example I gave was during the pandemic, where there were some businesses who were way ahead of the game, putting on live gigs, but allowing you to tap in and watch it and be there. Not quite VR, but actually watch the live gig, which was in an arena with no fans, but you were one of the paying fans, and 10,000 people were buying these tickets. But yeah, that's where we're going. And I think it scares me a wee bit as well. Joseph McGonigal, what happened to that Griffith scarf? Doesn't the staunch steward have it somewhere? Maybe in his locker. I think he took it off the post.
That'll be long gone. That will be long
gone. The Samurai Snood. Absolutely, the Samurai Snood. Where is that? The syrup that from the guy who features on TV sitting in the main stand. He's the guy he was sitting behind Noel Gallagher. The Man City game. He's got the barnet.
I saw him. The wig. I saw him in town actually. He got out of fancy looking car in the middle of town. I think I asked somebody about him. They said who he was in terms of like Glasgow mafia, not actual mafia, but like he is
A businessman.
A businessman of sorts. But he's a cult hero.
He is. He definitely is a cult hero. We've got Livingston coming up. The Urban Culture says Livingston will be bouncing on Sunday. Fair play to our away fans and the ultras.
Yeah,
You got a ticket? You got a ticket, JP?
I am going. It'll be the last trip there potentially. I mean, do Livingston come back up if they go down?
They'll find it difficult. They'll find it difficult.
I mean, they don't have the support. You see their attendances for a run-of-the-mill league game, and the stadium's empty. I mean, that to me is like a high street shop that's still clinging on to the fact that it had people there 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It's not really. You go into like WH Smith now and you see 4 or 5 aisles of magazines, and you're like, is anybody buying these? I really don't know if they are, and very few people will be. And Livingston as a club, they either need a major investment or it's going to go only one way, I think. And it's annoying because they are genuinely one of the few clubs that see an opportunity, a business opportunity, and take it by giving us the 3 stands. And we're now approaching a point in time where over half of the league it will be almost impossible to get an away ticket for because of the numbers. So whilst I don't maybe agree with like 3 stands, I think that's a bit extreme. I can see why they're doing it. Maybe 2 stands would be enough, but obviously they're taking the opportunity while they can to make money because they need to go and sign more basketball players.
Well, the big thing with me talking about that, I mentioned it the other day. I actually said maybe I'm wrong. I think they'll be at the top league for the next decade. JP, I mean, the reasons they're in there, the twice that they've come up and become a Premiership club, I think are anomalies. The first one was loads of money was getting pumped into them. Some criminal. I'm not talking about a ton because people ended up in jail because of it, right? Some criminal money was getting pumped into that football club, and they had that period of success. This time round, it was the David Hopkin created an incredible Livingston team, and they started getting these back-to-back promotions, and then he left them once they went to the Premier League, and they found a way staying there. But now, without that with that lack rather of investment, even the naming rights to the stadium after 9 seasons are disappearing. You're going to find it really difficult to come back up. I mean, Dundee United, I think Inverness, who haven't even done that well, Partick Thistle, all in a championship, I think are better placed. I even think Queen's Park are in better shape than Livingston certainly are financially. So I agree with you. It might be the last time for a while that you'll get the chance to go to that stadium. You're not going to be back on here until after that game. Give me a wee prediction before you go, JP.
I'm not a fan of them. Logic would dictate that we're going to win on Sunday, given the resources that we have. However, I'm very, very mindful of it, and I'm not going there in any way thinking, "Oh, this is a 3-4, 5-0 job." I would happily take a victory of any kind, as we well know. The Kilmarnock game is still haunting me. That Celtic Park game where we conceded at the death. We should have won that game comfortably. So every game is a hazard at the moment, and well, we're playing 24 hours after Rangers on Sunday, so it'd be interesting to know on Sunday at midday what position we're at in the league, because who knows if we're going to be behind again or if we're going to still be top or what, because I do think that is an intriguing game on Saturday that by no means is a foregone conclusion for them either. And if they're thinking like that, then we'll be tied them, because you can't think like that at all in these games, because look at the pressure that's going to be on them on Saturday, and then the pressure switches to us on Sunday. And we've gone there before and had 3 stands and not 1. So it's not all about the fans, although the fans will play their part. But the team was looking before the international break more like a Celtic side, more like a Brendan Rodgers Celtic side. And I hope not much has happened in that time period to derail that in any way. And we'll see whether or not we'll have a manager in the dugout on Sunday. That'll be decided after today.
Yep. And a few people are coming in to say we don't have a time. It's strange that, isn't it? We don't actually know when the hearing is happening. At some point today, it will happen, the Flying Haggis. So thank you, everybody, for getting involved. 1,400 plus, 1,500 strong on the live stream this Thursday afternoon. It is always a pleasure to catch up with JP with a wee bit of judicial propaganda. That's what we're talking about today. A wee bit of music and also Celtic as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. If you want to come and see us in Dunoon or Glasgow or even Grangemouth, then all the ticket links are underneath this particular video. It's always great to see you in person. All that's left for me to say thank you, JP Mason, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.